Hey guys, Uncommon Ramen here with another TCG Tuesday. Last Tuesday we looked at keyword abilities. This Tuesday we're going to look at something that I've seen confound new players a lot in the time that I've been teaching people. We're going to look at the difference between sacrificing, destroying, and discarding. When new players start out in Magic the Gathering, a lot of them, I'm not going to say everyone, but a lot of them think that sacrifice, destroy, and discard are all synonymous terms. And there is some, issue with that in the past. Magic the Gathering, when it first started, up to a very specific point, had a lot of ambiguous text throughout sets that made it seem like certain terms were more synonymous than other terms. But as Magic the Gathering has matured, they've taken these situations and removed them completely. So if you see something that says discard and you see something else that says destroy and you see something else that says sacrifice, they are actually very different terms in this game, and they're not synonymous at all. If something is being sacrificed, it is not being destroyed. If something is being discarded, it is not being sacrificed. So it's very important to understand that. So we're going to take a look at them with some example cards that I have picked out here and kind of show what the difference of each of these things are. So we're going to start with sacrificing. And we're actually going to look at some cards where sacrificing is kind of a secondary part of the card. So if we look at something like this, we have Makeshift Munitions. It says pay 1, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Makeshift Munitions deals 1 damage to any target. So basically, in this particular case, a sacrifice is kind of paying tribute to something or utilizing something for something else that it may not actually be. So for in this case, they're actually launching artifacts and, well, in this case you can see right here, launching statues, other objects, other like living beings out of something as a weapon. And that's where the sacrifice comes in. And as you can tell, in this particular case, sacrifice is a voluntary action. You are voluntarily choosing one of your creatures and or permanents to sacrifice. So if we move on, we have Defiant Salvager. It says sacrifice an artifact or creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Defiant Salvager. This is another case where it's as if you're paying tribute to something to get a benefit. You are sacrificing a creature or an artifact to give this creature a +1/+1 counter permanently. So as you continue to do so, it's going to continue to grow in power from a 2/2 to whatever you end up growing it to. But again, what you'll notice is this is voluntary. This is an action that you're choosing to take. Okay. The next one up will have Spark Harvest says, as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature or pay 3 and a black. So this spell will cost more to cast unless you sacrifice a creature. And then you'll notice right below it, it says destroy target creature or planeswalker. So you can see where there's the terms are used on the same card, and so that indicates they're very different terms. You are going to sacrifice a creature, and in return, you will also destroy a creature, which I'll go into greater detail on in a moment. The last card we're going to look at for sacrificing is a card called Chainer's Edict, or Edict. Chainer's Edict says target player sacrifices a creature. So this is the one difference from the rest of these. In the rest of these cards, the sacrifice was very voluntary. It was obvious that you could choose to do that, or you could choose not to do it. In the case of Spark Harvest, if you choose not to do it, you have to pay extra. In the case of the Makeshift Munitions and Defiant Salvager, if you choose not to do the action, then they simply do not receive any of the benefits from the action. This is the one case where it's forced, but it's not forced in a sense that your opponent is targeting something and destroying it. It's forced in a sense that he's forcing you to choose amongst the creatures that you have to sacrifice one of them. You still have the choice of which one gets sacrificed. So that is the major difference between destroying and sacrificing, is that in sacrificing, you have the choice of which permanent is getting sacrificed. When it's being destroyed, it's forced by your opponent, which we'll go into in greater detail. But what I want to talk about here is that sacrificing, because it's by choice, the thing that you're sacrificing cannot really be saved. Okay, so for instance, let's say you have Snakeskin Veil in your hand that allows you to give a creature hexproof at instant speed. If your opponent plays Chainer's Edict, and then the creature you are choosing to sacrifice, you choose to also cast Snakeskin Veil on, the creature will gain hexproof, but it still can be sacrificed, because the reality is sacrificing isn't targeting it. And it's a voluntary action on your part, so it's not, you can't save it. And that is the same for a term called regeneration, which is also a keyword text ability that has been lost to time. Regeneration, well, remember I talked about Shroud in the other video. Shroud was replaced kind of pretty much by hexproof, which allows you to target it but not your opponent. Well, regeneration kind of got replaced by indestructible in a sense. Regeneration said that the turn that a creature dies, you can pay a cost and put it from the graveyard back into play tapped. Okay, so in the case of sacrificing, you cannot regenerate something that's been sacrificed because you voluntarily sacrificed it. It is not being destroyed involuntarily. It is being voluntarily sacrificed and therefore cannot be regenerated. And last but not least, sacrificing does affect indestructible as well, because sacrificing isn't destroying. So if you only have one creature in play and that creature is indestructible, and your opponent plays this card that makes you sacrifice a creature, you can legally and have no choice but to sacrifice your indestructible creature, because it's not being destroyed and it's not taking damage. It is simply being sacrificed by you voluntarily, even though it was a forced hand. So that's the thing that you have to understand about sacrificing, is that there really isn't a way to save your creature. So for instance, with the Defiant Salvager, if you sacrifice a creature with regeneration, you can't then turn around and regenerate the creature so that you can sacrifice it again. It's just not something you can do. So that brings me to destruction. Destroy target creature. Destroy target creature. Destroy target artifact or land. So what's different between destroying and sacrificing is that destroying is chosen by the opponent. This one says destroy target creature and its controller discards a card. So you'll notice that, again, another combination where we have destroy followed by discard. Okay, this shows that they are two completely different mechanics. Okay, so destroy target creature means that this opponent, when they cast the spell, can choose a creature, even their own, and destroy that creature. Because this is a forced thing that is not voluntary on the player's side, that creature can be saved. This does the same thing, destroy target creature. That means that because it does say destroy target creature, that creature can be regenerated. It also, if you have Snakeskin Veil and you cast it at instant speed to give your creature hexproof, can be protected against this card, because hexproof makes it untargetable by opponents, and murder specifically targets a creature. This also means that things with indestructible are immune to this type of card. You cannot use destruction against indestructible creatures. The last example here, it says right at the end of the destroy target artifact or land, it says it can't be regenerated. You will find several kill spells like this that say exactly that. It can't be regenerated. This is the one exception to regeneration, where this spell, if you killed a creature with regeneration, would not prevent it from being able to regenerate, which means you could then pay the cost to regenerate the creature. This one, if it destroys a permanent with regeneration, the regenerating permanent cannot regenerate, and therefore it would have to either become hexproof or become indestructible or find another way to be saved. Last but not least, we have discarding. So originally I showed you this card right here. It says destroy target creature, its controller discards a card. There are other types of things like this one right here. Elvish Doomsayer says when it dies, each opponent discards a card. But there are some that actually are part of a cost. Like for instance, this one says draw a card, then discard a card. Or this one right here says discard a card, then draw a card. Discarding a card will always be from your hand. So here we have destroying permanents. Here we have sacrificing permanents. Both of these cases are permanents on the playfield, never in the hand. These will never target cards in the hand, okay? These right here, when it says discard a card, they target the hand. In this case, it targets a creature on the field and it targets your opponent, which they have to discard a card from the hand. So when you discard a card, it's always going to be from the hand. In this case, you get to choose which card you discard. Same with this one. Each opponent discards a card. In some cases, that's not how it works. We have other cards like, let me find one, Duress right here, that says an opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-creature, non-land card from it, and that player discards that card. Okay? This one is specific. It says hand, whereas these ones do not say hand, but if it says discard, it's always talking about hand. Okay? There are other instances where it will tell you to discard a card at random. In those cases, you would simply shuffle up your hand so that the cards are random, and then you would put your hand out face down so that your opponent can choose one of those cards and they are discarded. In the case of these cards, it says discard a card and draw a card. These are just extra payments on top of whatever payments that were already required. Like for instance, this one you have to tap and then you discard a card, then you draw a card. So for tapping this and discarding a card, you get to draw a card. On this end, you have tap 2, tap this, draw a card, then discard a card. It's just a payment for drawing the card. You follow up by then discarding a card. This one, you get to choose any card from your hand, even the one that you drew, whereas this one you have to discard before you've drawn. But just understand that that is always from the hand. So those are the major differences between what a discard effect is, a destroy effect, and a sacrifice effect is. Sacrifice is almost always voluntary. Because it's a sacrifice, there's not very many ways to save it. In fact, I don't think there are any ways to save a sacrificed creature. You can't even bounce it. So if you choose to sacrifice it and then you choose to use something to bounce it back to your hand or to put it back into your library from play, you can't do that. It would have to be from the graveyard. Destroying is involuntary. Destroying means that your opponent is choosing, and therefore the creature can be saved through hexproof, indestructible, regeneration, for the most part, not always, or some other effect like bouncing the creature back to your hand from play, or putting the permanent into your library, either on top or some part of the library. Those all are effective in stopping a destruction spell. Discarding will always be from the hand. You will always have, when it says discard, it will always mean discarding one card or multiple cards from your hand. And that's it, folks. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, especially if it has something to do with the video at hand. If you leave any negative comments, I will be removing those outright. There's no need for negativity. If you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say it. Just move on. Let's see. I have a Patreon. If you feel inclined to support me so that I can bring more content, I do this whole thing in my free time. So the more, I guess, support that I can get, the more free time I can devote to getting more content up for everyone. And last but not least, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. Everyone that does, I appreciate greatly. Everyone here who has been watching my videos regularly has been incredible help and inspiration for getting this content out there. So again, guys, that is the difference between discarding, sacrificing, and destroying. And until next time, guys, peace.